project at NSA, I had an advisory committee that was made up of people like Dr. Mays from Morehouse was on it, and people from all of the South. And one thing they made very clear was that since I was older and quote an advisor on SNCC, that I could not get involved in the actual demonstrations and the picket lines. My role was, and this the title of the chapter in the book was, quote, an official observer. And what that entailed was that when, like when the students at the Atlanta Student Movement went up to have a sit-in in Rich's store, Magnolia Room, downtown here, I stood on the sidelines and watched, and it was, you know, being white and a woman, I wasn't as, I mean, they had no idea that I was with SNCC, so what I could do, though, was see exactly what was going on, and then I would either call the press. We had a few people at the Journal and Constitution, a few people in the press who were sympathetic, and I could say 30 students were just arrested, so-and-so. They were taken to the Atlanta police station, or I could call. The other thing is I could call the National Student Association, our national office in Philadelphia, and tell them what was happening. And one interesting aspect of that, it was because students from colleges all over the country, when they found out what Woolworths was doing, they started boycotting Woolworths. And this was partially the national boycott that finally got Woolworths to allow their lunch counters to be integrated. So the fact of trying to get the story out and get the information to Don Hollowell here in Atlanta, who was the attorney for a lot of the demonstrations, so he could get, I'd say there were 30 people, you know, in jail. And so it was a very interesting role. And I tell you, there's a story attached to that. When I was at the Magnolia Room, at the elevator in Rich's, Dr. King and Lonnie King and Julian and a whole bunch of students from Atlanta University were sitting in there, and I was standing by the elevator waiting for them to come out of the Magnolia Room, and standing right next to me was Calvin Craig, who was the head of the Klan. And he was very well known. He was very outspoken about stuff, and he was there seeing what was happening and cursing under his breath, you know, the damn so-and-so and so-and-so. And I remember this clearly. I was saying, dear God, when Lonnie and Julian and all of them come out, please don't let them say, hey, Connie, how are you doing? And they came out, and they looked, and they saw me, and they knew Calvin Craig, and they never acknowledged my presence at all. On the same page with my cowardice. But let me tell you something interesting I found out last night when I went to this thing that Zernona Clayton was sponsoring at the Trumpet Awards. She was there chairing it, and she mentioned Calvin Craig because she was in contact with Calvin Craig in the early years, and he denounced the Klan, resigned in '67, and who was there last night, who she called up on stage, was Calvin Craig's daughter. Zernona Clayton and Calvin Craig's daughter are best friends. She'd come down to Washington for Zernona's event, and it was so moving because Calvin Craig's daughter comes up and publicly thanks Zernona last night for saving her father and her family by talking to him about the Klan. And they both had tears in their eyes, and they were best friends, the ex-Klan's daughter and Zernona Clayton. So it was an interesting experience. But anyway, I was in Nashville, and I saw the students, what they did in Nashville during the sit-ins is the white mob people would go in there and put cigarettes out on the backs of the sit-inners at the counters. And, you know, and then they were all arrested, and I would report that to what, you know, what was happening. And I never will forget Chuck McDew, who was chair of SNCC at the time, and we were debating, and this was always in the long meetings we would have down on Auburn Avenue, the long meetings of SNCC. They would debate issues, and one of them was the particularly from the Nashville students, the whole theory of nonviolence. And there were a lot of people in SNCC who believed that nonviolence was, quote, a way of life and, the entire philosophy. And then there were people who believed that nonviolence was a technique, that they couldn't have it be part of their lives. And Chuck McDew, after Nashville, said, yeah, well, it's fine. I'm not going to turn around and hit that SOB that's putting the cigarettes out of my back, but I sure don't have to love him.
Amen.
And this was sort of one of the debates that the kind of thing that was going on. So anyway, that was my main role, was to sit in long meetings while SNCC had most incredible debates and coming around to agree on things, because consensus was really important, and to be an official observer.
What was your greatest moment in SNCC and your worst moment?
I can't answer the greatest moment because there were so many of them. The most moving thing is in 1960 that I remember so clearly, when SNCC was so open and so embracing of all people from everywhere, and all I remember mostly was when we stood up and held each other's hands and sang "We Shall Overcome." We really believed it, and we really and truly believed that that was true, that we were going to overcome. And well, the scaredest I've ever been, I don't know if it was the worst moment, was not as much as I worked in Mississippi. The scaredest ever was in South Georgia when we got pulled over in Telfair County. Winifred Green, another white woman who was working for the Quakers, we got pulled over, and the sheriff, said, "What were you doing up at that nigger preacher's house?" And said we were talking to his children about going to the white school, and because desegregation was supposedly under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act in 64. But he really built a scene for us of what was going to happen to us. And he said, "You see the guy in the overalls over there? He hates nigger lovers, particularly blonde, white, southern women." And that's the scariest I ever was in South Georgia. Yeah.
Well, I agree with Connie. It's hard to say the greatest moments because there were so many. I'll just say two. One, when SNCC and COFO organized a mock election 1963-64 to have an integrated slate for governor and lieutenant governor. We had Aaron Henry and Edward King. And to get out and get everyone engaged in a mock election, getting people out to vote, something that, it wasn't real, but it was real. And we got such great participation. We had people who were organizing from everywhere. We talk about creative organizing.